The first time Mackenzie Leonard saw Davis Adams differently, she was 12 and he had just turned 18. He was the boy next door, tall, athletic, full of laughter and muscle, and blessed with the kind of effortless charm that turned heads at every neighborhood football match. To others, he was just that local kid with a good heart and quick feet. But to Mackenzie, he was a walking daydream. She would press her face against her bedroom window, watching him toss footballs in the compound or joke around with his younger sister Amara. There was something about the way he carried himself, like he didn't know he was the most beautiful boy she had ever seen, that made her heart stutter. At 12, her world revolved around school, fairy tales, and the future she secretly hoped would have Davis in it. She never missed his games, often sneaking to the community field just to sit at the back with her homework on her lap, pretending not to be looking while her eyes followed his every move. Her notebooks were filled with his name doodled on the margins, always hidden carefully from her mother's curious eyes. She knew he saw her as just the girl next door, a book-smart child who liked to bake cookies with her mom and wore glasses too big for her small face. But Mackenzie didn't care. In her world, he was already hers. She would belong to him. Someday. Davis, for his part, barely noticed the little girl with the round glasses and long legs, who always waved shyly whenever he passed. He thought she was adorable. Amara's quiet, polite friend who always offered him a small smile and rushed away before he could say more than hello. He was 18 then, on the brink of everything: university dreams, sports scholarships, and a future that looked more American than African. Lagos was home, but opportunity whispered from the glossy brochures of U.S. colleges and scouting agents who attended his matches. He had a shot, a real one, and he intended to take it. Still, there were nights he'd sit outside under the stars with a ball under his feet and catch a glimpse of her through her window, face bathed in the glow of her desk lamp as she studied late. He once told Amara, "Your friend is going to become something big. She works harder than anyone I've seen." But even in those fleeting thoughts, he never imagined her in the same world as his. She was too beautiful in a quiet, graceful way. Not the kind of beauty that screamed to be seen, but the kind that stayed with you, like the warmth of a childhood memory you didn't know you treasured. The day Davis got his scholarship letter was a blur of hugs, screams, and celebratory drinks. The whole street gathered to toast the local boy who was now heading to the United States to play in the NFL, first in college, then, if luck smiled, as a pro. Mackenzie stood at a corner of the compound, her hands clutching a homemade card she'd drawn for him. Her heart thundered in her chest. She wasn't sure what she wanted to say. "I'll miss you," or maybe, "Don't forget me." But when she finally worked up the courage to step forward, Davis was already surrounded by his friends and neighbors. Their laughter drowned her small voice. She turned around and walked back into her house before the tears could fall. The night before his departure, she placed the card in his family's mailbox, sealed with a drawing of a football and a note that read, "Congratulations, I know you'll be great." No name, no confession. Just a silent hope that one day he might look back and remember her, the girl who once loved him before the world did. When Davis boarded his flight to America, Mackenzie felt the world tilt. Something inside her broke. Silently, like a thread snapping in a dress no one noticed was unraveling. She didn't eat for 2 days, and when her mother asked, she only shrugged and claimed she had a cold. She buried herself in her schoolwork, acing her exams with the determination of someone trying to outrun a feeling. But every now and then, she would check his Facebook, scroll through photos of him in training, laughing with teammates, posing with cheerleaders, and her heart would ache in ways she couldn't describe. Years passed, but her feelings didn't. They only deepened. By the time she turned 16, Mackenzie had blossomed into a young woman with sharp wit, soulful eyes, and the kind of ambition that made her teachers call her the girl who will change the world. She had stopped wearing glasses, grown into her features, and discovered a love for numbers and business. But even as she charted her own path, first in university, then as an intern in a top accounting firm, Davis never truly left her mind. He was everywhere. ESPN highlights, Instagram reels, magazine interviews. He'd become the boy who made it, the pride of their street, the Lagos legend who now lived in Los Angeles, married to a beautiful influencer with millions of followers. Bella, that was her name. Tall, perfect, and everything Mackenzie felt she could never be. Their wedding went viral. Their daughters, Daisy and Pearl, were the definition of adorable. Mackenzie watched it all from the quiet of her one-bedroom apartment in Yaba, surrounded by audit reports and spreadsheets, and loneliness. She tried. She went on dates, met kind men, even said yes to a serious relationship once, but her heart was like a stubborn lock that refused to click open. No one made it flutter the way Davis once had, so eventually she gave up. She focused on her career, became a chartered accountant, and learned to smile at the memories without letting them drown her. Until one Sunday morning, 8 years after that flight took him away, she heard his name again, softly whispered by her mother over breakfast, like a ghost returning home. "Did you hear? Davis Adams is back in Lagos. He's moved into his father's house with his daughters." Mackenzie nearly dropped her spoon. The world tilted again. Davis Adams sat on the wooden bench outside his father's compound, the same bench he had once slouched on as a restless teenager, dreaming of lights, stadiums, and escape. The Lagos heat clung to his skin, thick and unrelenting, but he didn't mind. It reminded him he was home, not just in a physical sense, but in the way only pain and nostalgia could wrap around your chest and squeeze. He stared at the faded concrete walls, the same ones he used to bounce footballs against, and for the first time in years, he felt small again. Lost, almost. He had returned not as a triumphant star, but as a man stripped of everything he once thought defined him. His career was hanging by a thread, his marriage was over, and his heart was bruised in ways he couldn't name. Bella had left him for another NFL player, a younger, flashier one who still had years in his contract and a fresh mansion in Miami. She didn't even fight for custody. Daisy and Pearl were his, completely. And while he loved his daughters more than life itself, Davis knew deep down that he was flailing. He didn't know how to start over. Not here, not alone, and definitely not with all the emotional wreckage he was carrying. The only reason he had come back was because of his father's voice on the phone, soft and tired. "Come home, son. Let the girls know where they come from. Let them know their grandmother's soil." And so he came. For the girls, for the roots, for the second chance he didn't think he deserved. He watched them now, playing in the front yard. Daisy, 5, already protective of her little sister, and Pearl, 3, clutching a teddy bear that had seen better days. They were his heartbeat, his grounding force, the only things that made the silence in his life bearable. But even they couldn't erase the ache that clawed at him every night, the ache of being left behind, of being betrayed, of realizing that everything you built was a house made of glass. And then she appeared, Mackenzie Leonard. She stepped out of her car in the next compound, wearing a soft pink blouse tucked into navy slacks, her natural curls tied into a bun at the nape of her neck. There was a quiet elegance about her, the kind that didn't scream for attention, but pulled the eye anyway. Her gait was confident, her face serene, but when she glanced in his direction, those eyes, those beautiful brown eyes, Davis felt something tighten in his chest. Was that really little Mackenzie? She was no longer the shy girl who used to peek at him from behind her mother's wrappers. She was a woman now, a stunning one. Davis stood, brushing his palms on his shorts nervously, and tried to remember how to smile. She waved, polite and composed, and he waved back, though the muscles in his arm felt awkward from disuse. They hadn't spoken in over 8 years, and yet something about her presence felt familiar, grounding. That evening, as his daughters napped and his father snored softly inside, Davis sat by the window scrolling through Instagram. He didn't post as often anymore, but curiosity led him down a rabbit hole. He found Mackenzie's profile quickly. Kenzie Leo. Her photos were tasteful, full of books, office shots, brunches with friends, and the occasional beach view. But her captions, they had a subtle weight to them. Not sadness, but a quiet wisdom. A kind of knowing. And he saw something else too. No pictures with a man. No wedding ring. No visible signs of a serious relationship. Just her and her world. alone but radiant. His fingers hovered over the message icon, then withdrew. She deserves more than this. More than a man who's failed at marriage. More than a father of two with baggage in tow. More than someone who once overlooked her completely. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Mackenzie had seen him long before he saw her. Mackenzie leaned against her bedroom window, just as she had all those years ago, watching Davis as he carried Pearl inside with gentle arms. He looked older now, bigger, heavier with grief perhaps, but still achingly beautiful. His beard was thicker, his walk slower, but there was tenderness in his eyes she had never seen before. And when Daisy ran up and clutched his leg, he bent down and kissed her forehead with such care it made Mackenzie's heart ache. She hadn't expected to feel anything when she saw him again. She had trained herself to forget. She had told herself for years that he was someone else's, that she had lost her chance before it ever began. But seeing him now, tired, single, and back home, unlocked something buried. Not love, not yet, but a possibility. A flicker of something dangerous and delicate. That night she lay in bed thinking about the past. She remembered the heartbreak of seeing his wedding photos, the cruel twist in her stomach when he posted a birthday tribute to Bella with the caption, "My queen, my everything." She had cried, then laughed at herself for being so foolish. How could a girl like her compete with a woman like Bella? Slim, light-skinned, glamorous, dripping in brand deals and expensive perfume. Mackenzie had always been the girl with the books, the sensible one, the good friend, the one who stayed home while everyone else partied. And even now, with her titles and achievements, she still felt like that 12-year-old sometimes, waiting behind the curtains, hoping for a glance that might never come. But now he was here, and hurting. And Mackenzie was no longer a child. Still, she couldn't help but wonder, would he see her now? Truly see her? Or would he keep believing she was too beautiful to belong to someone like him? Because that had always been the irony. Davis thought she was out of his league. Mackenzie thought she was never enough. And between their misunderstandings, 8 years of silence had bloomed like a field of thorns. After Davis left Lagos at 22, Mackenzie didn't cry in front of anyone. She smiled politely whenever neighbors mentioned his success, clapped during community watch parties of his college games, and even baked cupcakes the day he signed with his first NFL team. But inside, she mourned him like a first heartbreak. He was gone, not just across oceans, but across a chasm she couldn't cross. Still, she followed him, quietly, devotedly. Every article, every interview, every blurry photo tagged by a fan or reshared by his teammates. Her social media algorithm knew her obsession, feeding her stories about his tackles, his charity work, even his airport sightings. And when he posted personal photos, his apartment in Los Angeles, his new car, selfies with teammates, she devoured them, trying to piece together the man he was becoming. It was around the time she entered university that Davis's feed changed. There was a new presence, a girl named Bella, light-skinned with striking features and a waist so tiny Mackenzie once joked to herself that Bella could probably slip through a keyhole. At first the photos were vague, group shots, a blurry lunch date, but Mackenzie noticed the way Bella's hand always found his shoulder, how her name began to show up in the captions more often. Then the birthday post came. A carousel of couple photos, Davis and Bella at the beach, Davis and Bella laughing at a rooftop bar, Davis kissing her forehead while she smiled like she already had everything. Obtained caption, "Happy birthday to the woman who changed my life. I didn't know peace until I knew you." Mackenzie closed the app. She didn't open it for days, but when she did, she went back to that post and stared at the words over and over. Changed my life. Didn't know peace. Knew you. It was final. Complete. The kind of declaration that didn't leave room for what-ifs. That was the day she stopped dreaming. She threw herself into school, volunteering for extra projects, attending every accounting seminar, and chasing every internship she could find. Her classmates called her the machine. But at night, after the textbooks closed and the lights went out, Mackenzie would scroll through his feed, quietly like a ritual she hated herself for. Even when Bella became a fixture in his life, even when they had their first daughter, Daisy, and Mackenzie saw the tiny fingers curled around Davis's tattooed wrist, she still watched. It was self-inflicted pain. She knew that. But letting go felt like betrayal, like deleting a part of herself. Her friends didn't understand. "Girl, how are you still crushing on a man who probably doesn't even remember your name?" her roommate Moya once asked, exasperated. Mackenzie had smiled. "It's not about the crush. It's just hard to stop loving someone who never gave you a reason to hate them." Because Davis had never hurt her. Not directly. He'd never made a promise, never asked for her heart. He had simply lived his life, and she had watched, silently bleeding in the corners he couldn't see. When he married Bella in a lavish ceremony in California, Mackenzie was 24, working late nights as an accounting analyst. She saw the wedding photos by accident. One of her Twitter followers had liked the image, and the algorithm shoved it in her face like fate's cruel joke. Bella looked like a goddess in her gown, her hand wrapped around Davis's, their kiss framed by sunset and string lights. It was the most beautiful heartbreak Mackenzie had ever seen. She turned off her phone for a week. She even tried to move on. Moyo set her up with someone, a soft-spoken architect named Tunde. He was kind, attentive, and good-looking, in a quiet way. They went on 5 dates. On the 6th, he leaned in to kiss her, and she flinched. She apologized, crying in the Uber ride home. Not because Tunde had done anything wrong, but because he wasn't Davis. Eventually, she stopped trying. She told herself it was better to be alone than to fake it with someone else. She climbed the ladder at work, got certified, saved up for a car and her own apartment. People saw her and assumed she was living her best life. She let them. Let them believe she was strong. Let them believe she had moved on. But every time Davis posted a birthday picture of his girls, every time he shared a video of himself brushing Daisy's hair or dancing with little Pearl in the living room, Mackenzie's heart ached in new, unfamiliar ways. He was a good father, the kind of man any woman would be lucky to have, and that, more than anything, made it harder to let go. Then one day the post stopped. No more Bella, no more couple photos, no more flowery captions or luxury vacations. Just pictures of Davis with his daughters, smiling but tired. There was a weight in his eyes, a heaviness in his smile. A year passed, and then silence. Until the day her mother, completely unaware of the earthquake her words would cause, said, "I saw Davis Adams with 2 little girls yesterday. He's back, moved into his father's house. I think his marriage ended." Mackenzie felt the world shift. She tried to act normal. She nodded. She even smiled. But her hands shook when she held her cup of tea. Her mind raced. Could it be true? After all these years, after watching him build a life with someone else, was he really back? She didn't check his social media that day. She didn't need to. Because when she stepped out of her house the next morning and saw him crouching beside his daughter's bicycle, laughing softly as he adjusted the chain, she knew. Davis Adams was home. And for the first time in a long time, Mackenzie's heart did something she hadn't felt in years. It fluttered. Bella was unforgettable. She had the kind of beauty that seemed manufactured for the spotlight. Flawless makeup, glowing skin, a curated body sculpted by the finest gyms in Los Angeles. Her Instagram presence was magnetic. Millions followed her, not because she was relatable, but because she wasn't. She was every man's dream and every woman's pressure point, and for a while she was Davis Adams's world. Mackenzie had watched it all unfold like a woman trapped behind glass, silent, invisible, unable to turn away. She remembered the way the media announced their engagement. Lagos-born NFL star Davis Adams pops the question to fashion and lifestyle influencer Bella Duke in Paris. She remembered the sparkling ring, the Eiffel Tower in the background, and Bella's perfect smile as she showed off her fiancé. For weeks, Mackenzie couldn't scroll through her phone without seeing their faces. They were on blog covers, YouTube interviews, magazine spreads. Bella was everywhere. Her content shifted. Suddenly she was giving wife tips, documenting her pregnancy glow, and filming vlogs about building a family with an athlete. Davis wasn't just her man, he was her brand. And to the world, they looked perfect. To Mackenzie, they looked impossible. She had tried to make peace with it, had even tried to convince herself that Bella must be a good person. After all, Davis was smart. He wouldn't marry just anyone, right? And maybe it was Mackenzie's own bitterness talking. But something about Bella always felt performative, too polished, too public, like her love was a product to be consumed. Still, Davis looked happy, at least at first. When Daisy was born, his joy was real. Mackenzie had seen it in the way he held the newborn, in the way his smile softened when he posted the words, "My whole world in my arms." Mackenzie cried that night, not out of jealousy, but from a strange mix of happiness and heartbreak. She wanted him to have a good life, even if it wasn't with her. Then came Pearl, and for a moment, everything seemed complete. 2 daughters, a wife, a mansion in Beverly Hills, red carpet appearances. Bella even launched a baby clothing line and did an interview where she talked about balancing motherhood, marriage, and being a mogul. But beneath all that glitter, the cracks were growing. They started subtly. Photos of Davis alone, long captions about reflection and growth. Then came the missing anniversary post. Fans noticed. Gossip pages speculated. Bella continued to post brand content, never addressing the rumors. But Davis grew quieter, more reserved. His smile and photos looked tired, forced. One day, Mackenzie opened Instagram and saw Bella's story, an extravagant vacation in Ibiza. She was dancing with another man, a fellow NFL player. The video only lasted seconds, but the body language was undeniable. The chemistry, the closeness, the way his hand lingered on her waist. Davis never addressed it. But a few weeks later, Bella posted a statement. "After years of trying to hold it together, I've chosen peace. Davis and I have decided to part ways amicably. I'll always respect him as the father of my girls, and I wish him well." Just like that, it ended. No public fight, no scandalous tell-all. Just a quiet fade out of a marriage that had once lit up the internet. Bella returned to her influencer life, back to solo travel, brand deals, and glamorous brunches in Malibu. Davis, however, disappeared. The next photo Mackenzie saw of him was one that broke her. It wasn't on his page. It was a fan photo taken at a park. He was sitting alone on a bench with his head bowed, holding Pearl while Daisy leaned against his arm. No filters, no lighting. Just raw fatherhood, exhaustion, and pain. Mackenzie stared at that photo for hours. She didn't know what she was feeling. Was it vindication? Sadness? Maybe both. Maybe neither. All she knew was he was no longer someone else's. Not in title, at least. But was he truly free? Could someone walk out of a storm like that and still be whole? Even when the breakup was official, Mackenzie didn't reach out. She could have. She knew people who knew people. Her cousin worked in sports PR and had Davis's number saved. But she didn't. She wasn't sure what she would say. "Hi, remember me? The girl next door who used to stare at you like you hung the stars." So she waited. And fate did what fate always does. It brought him home. Not as a star, not as someone living large, but as a man with 2 daughters, 2 tired eyes, and more baggage than a return flight from LAX. She didn't know if she should be hopeful or cautious. He was back, yes, but what if all she'd loved about him, his fire, his dream, his boyish confidence, had been lost to years of public life and private heartbreak? She told herself to be careful. But then he looked at her, really looked. And in that single glance, something whispered inside her heart. He's not whole, but neither am I. And maybe, just maybe, that was how healing began. Davis didn't sleep the night he landed in Lagos. The city was quieter than he remembered, maybe because it was past midnight, or maybe because the version of him that had left 8 years ago had been louder, younger, and far more eager to run. Now he had returned with 2 sleeping girls in the backseat of the car, a heart full of regrets, and a silent prayer that he'd made the right choice. His father's compound in Surulere hadn't changed much. The same metal gate, the same patch of gravel in front, the same wooden door with the faded "God bless this house" plaque above it. But everything else had changed. His mother was gone, buried 2 years ago, while Davis was too wrapped in a crumbling marriage to fly back. His sister Amara had married a military officer and lived in Abuja now. And Davis had fallen from being a golden boy of football to just another man trying to hold it together. He carried Daisy inside first, gently laying her on the couch. Pearl stirred when he lifted her from the car seat, her little fists curling around his shirt collar. He kissed her forehead, humming a tune his mother used to sing to him when he was scared. She settled instantly. Davis felt his chest tighten. This was what mattered now. These girls, this house, this second chance. His father had waited up, eyes misty when he opened the door. The older man didn't say much, just held Davis for a long time before helping him bring the bags inside. They didn't talk about Bella, or football, or the headlines. They just sat quietly at the dining table later, sipping water, while Davis whispered, "I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Pops." "You don't have to," his father said gently. "Just love those girls. Let them feel safe. The rest will come." The next morning, the Lagos sun was merciless. Pearl screamed in delight as she ran barefoot across the compound, chasing a butterfly. Daisy helped Amara's old housekeeper, Mama Nkechi, water the plants. Davis leaned against the wall, watching, shirtless and barefoot, his heart torn between gratitude and grief. For all he had lost. For all he might still rebuild. That was when he saw her. Mackenzie. She stepped out of the gate next door in a flowing olive green dress, her laptop bag slung over one shoulder, her natural curls tucked under a simple scarf. She was speaking softly into her phone, her brow furrowed in concentration. Then she looked up. Their eyes met. It was like a scene from a memory, almost too perfect to be real. Davis felt winded. She was breathtaking, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a way that made time slow. She had grown into the kind of woman that made men forget they ever knew another. Graceful, composed, quiet fire in her eyes, and yet there was something familiar about her, a softness that reminded him of another time, of long-ago smiles and late-night glimpses from opposite windows. She gave him a small smile, uncertain, and waved. He raised his hands slowly in response, his throat tightening. So many things he wanted to say. "I'm sorry. I missed you. Do you remember me?" But all that came out was a hoarse, "Hi." "Hi," she said back, her voice barely above the wind. And then she was gone, walking down the street, into a waiting cab, and out of sight. But her image lingered long after. Later that day, Davis sat on the front steps while Daisy braided her doll's hair and Pearl napped inside. His father had gone to the mosque and the compound was quiet again. He kept thinking about Mackenzie, the way she walked, the way she looked at him, not with pity, not with fanfare, but with something honest. He remembered her now. Not just the girl with the oversized glasses and the shy waves, but the quiet presence that had always hovered on the edge of his world. The way she used to drop off cookies for Amara, sneak glances at him during practice, and once left a note in their mailbox when he left for America. He still had that card. He had kept it without knowing why, tucked it into a shoebox filled with old medals and letters. He never looked at it during his peak years, but now he remembered the handwriting, the drawing of the football, the simple message, "I know you'll be great." He hadn't been great, not really. But maybe, just maybe, he still had time to be good. That evening, he walked to the small grocery store 2 streets away. Lagos smelled like fuel and suya smoke, like it always had. Familiar chaos, loud generators, street hawkers yelling over honking cars. Davis felt strangely comforted by it all. As he paid for some biscuits and juice boxes for the girls, he spotted a flyer pinned on the store wall. It was for a financial literacy seminar. The speaker? Mackenzie Leonard, chartered accountant. He blinked at the name. That was her. She wasn't just beautiful now. She was successful, accomplished. The kind of woman his younger self would have admired from a distance, convinced she was too good for him. But he wasn't 18 anymore. And she wasn't 12. Still, he wondered, after everything he'd been through, after the scandals, the broken marriage, the emotional scars, could someone like her love someone like him? He had nothing flashy to offer, just a weary heart, two small girls, and the hope that maybe Lagos had brought them back to each other for a reason. That night, he tucked his daughters into bed and stood at the window, staring at the space between his house and Mackenzie's. The lights were on in her room. He could see her silhouette against the curtains, head bent, typing on her laptop. He whispered to himself, maybe she still sees me. What he didn't know was that she did. Every day, she had never stopped. Mackenzie hadn't planned to run into Davis again that soon. The first time had shaken her, more than she'd admit to anyone, including herself. It wasn't just seeing him again, it was how different he looked. Older, yes, a little heavier. The smooth, boyish charm replaced by a rougher, grown man's stillness. But it wasn't just physical. His eyes, they carried something deeper now. Pain, tiredness, humility, and fatherhood. She could see it written in the way he kept his eyes on the girls, even from afar, in the gentle way he spoke to Daisy when she fell off her scooter, in the soft, tired patience with which he carried Pearl when she whined about the heat. This Davis was familiar but layered, no longer the fantasy from her childhood. He was real now. It had been a week since that first encounter, and she tried to act normal. She had her work, deadlines, client reports, and team meetings. But her mind wandered, especially in the evenings when she heard faint giggles from next door and saw him in the compound, sweeping, folding laundry on the rail, or reading on the steps with one girl resting on his shoulder. She knew she had to stop romanticizing. He was a man rebuilding from scratch, with children, with pain, and with a past that had trended on Nigerian blogs. But how do you kill a flame that never really went out? It was on a Wednesday afternoon when fate interfered again. She was leaving the supermarket in her work clothes, struggling with 2 bags of groceries and trying to unlock her car when she heard a voice behind her. Need help? She turned, and there he was, Davis, in a plain white t-shirt, gray joggers, and sneakers that had seen better days. He looked effortlessly handsome, even in simplicity. A baseball cap shielded most of his face from the sun, but his eyes were unmistakable. Mackenzie swallowed and forced a smile. I'm fine, thank you. He reached for the heavier bag anyway, lifting it with ease. At least let me help you get it in the car. It's the least I can do. She opened the boot silently, unsure if she was nervous, shy, or just deeply overwhelmed by the scent of him, clean, warm, faintly like baby powder and musk. He placed the bag gently, then stepped back. You're Mackenzie, right? He asked, almost sheepishly. She nodded. And you're Davis. He laughed softly. I wasn't sure you'd remember me. I remembered you when I was 12, she said before she could stop herself. Her face flushed instantly. I mean, you were kind of hard to forget. You and Amara used to make noise all over the compound. His laughter deepened, and it wrapped around her like a hug. Yeah, we were a handful. She bit her lip, trying to stay calm. How's Amara, by the way? Married, Abuja, 2 kids, still bossy. Mackenzie smiled. Some things never change. He nodded slowly. Then his voice dropped a little. I saw your name on a flyer the other day. Chartered accountant, financial literacy stuff. That's impressive. Thanks, she said, surprised by the warmth in his tone. It's taken a lot of long nights, but I love it. You always were focused, he said, studying her. Even as a kid. I remember thinking, that girl's gonna be a powerhouse one day. She laughed, touched more than she wanted to admit. Well, I'm not quite a powerhouse, but I try. A pause fell between them. Comfortable, weighted, real. Your daughters are beautiful, she added softly. I see them playing in the compound sometimes. His smile faltered for a second. Thanks. They're, they're my world. I can tell, she said. They're lucky to have you. He looked at her, and in that moment, Mackenzie saw it clearly. He wasn't the Davis from the headlines. He wasn't the fantasy she had crushed on. He was a man, flesh and bone, hurt and healing, trying. And somehow that made her want him more. I should let you go, she said quickly. Groceries, meetings, Legos traffic. Of course, he said, stepping back. But then he paused. Hey, Mackenzie, would it be weird if I said I'd like to talk sometime? Properly? She looked at him, trying not to let her heart leap too obviously. Not weird, she said. Just let me know when. He grinned. I will. As she drove away, Mackenzie's fingers trembled slightly on the steering wheel. She wasn't 12 anymore, and Davis Adams wasn't a fantasy she had to chase through screens. He was back, in her city, on her street. And this time, maybe, just maybe, he was looking at her too. Davis hadn't planned to open up to Mackenzie that soon. But life, especially life after loss, had a way of forcing you to seek softness wherever it appeared. And Mackenzie, she had always been soft, not in weakness, but in the kind of gentleness that made even the most hardened edges feel like they didn't have to stay sharp forever. They met again on a Sunday afternoon. The girls were away with their grandfather, and Davis was sitting under the mango tree in front of the house trying to make sense of his future. He had a resume that said NFL champion and a heart that said failure. The two didn't seem to match anymore. The world still saw him as the superstar. The blog still mentioned his name when Bella posted thirst traps with her new man. But inside, Davis felt like a man made of cracked glass, whole from a distance, shattered up close. Mackenzie saw him before he saw her. She was coming back from church, a light brown dress hugging her curves modestly. Bible in one hand, her phone in the other. She hesitated before turning into her compound, then walked over instead. The closer she got, the clearer it was. He looked tired. Not just physically, but in his soul. Mind if I join you? She asked, her voice calm. He glanced up, surprised, but grateful. Please. She sat beside him on the concrete ledge beneath the tree. They didn't speak for a moment. The air buzzed with the hum of insects and the distant sound of a generator. Then he sighed. I think I forgot how to breathe for myself, Davis said suddenly. Mackenzie looked at him. What do you mean? For 8 years, my life was scheduled. Training, press, appearances, Bella, then the girls. Every hour had a purpose. Even when I was falling apart, I had something to do, somewhere to be. Now, I sit here and it's like the world is asking me to exist. Just exist. And I don't know how. She didn't offer platitudes. Didn't say you'll be fine or it's a phase. Instead, she said the one thing no one had told him in a long time. It's okay to bleed, Davis. He turned to her, stunned by the words. I'm supposed to be strong. Who told you strength meant pretending you're not in pain? He stared at her, at the earnest, calm way she said it. Mackenzie, the girl who used to hide behind school books, now sat beside him like a woman who understood the cost of silence. And for the first time in months, he spoke the truth. Bella didn't love me anymore. And I knew for months before she left. I think she never really loved me. I was her ticket to a lifestyle. I was her brand. When I got injured and sat on the bench for half a season, she barely looked at me. When I told her I needed therapy, she told me to man up. When I cried, really cried, she rolled her eyes. Mackenzie swallowed. Her hands itched to touch his, but she let him speak. She cheated, he continued. Not once, not by mistake. She fell in love with someone else. A teammate, a guy I helped get drafted. I walked in on them, in my own house. Mackenzie's breath caught. I was angry, but I wasn't shocked. That's the worst part. I wasn't shocked, he said, chuckling bitterly. I just took the girls and left. And I've been angry at myself for not fighting, for letting it happen, for not seeing it coming. You did the best thing you could do, she said quietly. You protected your daughters. That's what matters. But what about me? He asked, the crack in his voice finally surfacing. What do I do with the love I gave her? The time? The loyalty? You mourn it, she said. You honor that version of you who believed. And then you let it go. So you can make space for something new. He looked at her for a long time. You ever loved someone who didn't even know it? She asked suddenly. He blinked. Yes. Her eyes flickered, but she smiled. Me too. A gust of wind danced through the trees, rustling the leaves above them. And in that silence, something passed between them, raw, invisible, but deeply understood. He reached for her hand then. Not in romance, not yet, but in gratitude. I'm not ready, he admitted. I'm still bleeding. I'm not asking for anything, she said. I'm just here. And that was the moment Davis Adams realized he had never truly seen Mackenzie Leonard. Not the way she deserved. Not the way she stood beside people when they were at their lowest. Not the way she listened, really listened. And for the first time, he didn't feel like a burden sitting beside her. He felt like a man being given a second chance, to be seen, and maybe someday, to be loved again. Davis hadn't planned to bring the girls over. It was just supposed to be another slow Saturday morning, one where he kept them busy with coloring books and old Disney movies while figuring out what to cook for lunch. But when Daisy turned to him, her big brown eyes wide with hope, and asked, "Can we go see the pretty lady next door?" He couldn't say no. So he found himself standing in front of Mackenzie's gate at 10:12 a.m., his daughters in tow, feeling awkward and unsure. Pearl clutched his hand tightly. Daisy skipped ahead, teddy bear bouncing under her arm. He hadn't even had time to think about how it might look, showing up like this, unannounced. But something told him Mackenzie wouldn't mind. She didn't. When she opened the door, dressed in a soft pastel tee and black leggings, her bare face glowing in the morning light, Davis momentarily forgot how to speak. It wasn't just how beautiful she looked. It was the warmth in her eyes when she saw the girls. Like she'd been expecting them her whole life. Uncle Davis said we could visit, Daisy announced proudly. Of course you can, Mackenzie said, smiling wide as she knelt down and opened her arms. Pearl didn't hesitate. She ran into her embrace like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Daisy followed, wrapping herself around Mackenzie's neck. Davis watched, stunned at how natural it was. How easy. Mackenzie welcomed them into her cozy apartment, already set up for quiet, happy moments. Cushions on the rug, children's books stacked in the corner, a small porcelain tea set she had kept from her niece's last visit. Within minutes, her living room transformed into a royal tea party. She gave them each a little crown made of golden foil and pink paper. She poured apple juice into delicate cups and handed out shortbread cookies in a glass tray. Pearl insisted on sitting in Mackenzie's lap, babbling about her favorite cartoon, while Daisy corrected her grammar like a mini-teacher. No, Davis sat on the side, taking it all in, his daughters giggling and chattering like birds in spring. And Mackenzie, she looked like she was made for this. There was something in the way she knelt to Pearl's level to tie her sandals, or how she praised Daisy's pretend British accent that made Davis's chest tighten. It hit him like a silent wave. Bella had never looked at them like this. Sure, she had posed for pictures with them, wrote captions about being a mompreneur, and dressing them up in matching designer dresses. But when the cameras were gone, so was her attention. She loved them, but from a place just far enough to keep herself untouched. Nannies bathed them. Assistants packed their school bags. Davis had been the real anchor, and now, watching Mackenzie treat them with more tenderness in 1 hour than Bella had in months, it made his heart drop. They were happy here. So happy. And not once did Mackenzie look at the clock or her phone. Not once did she act like this was charity or obligation. She was fully present, fully engaged. She spoke to Daisy like a peer, not a child. She tickled Pearl until her giggles echoed into the hallway. When Davis offered to step in or help, she waved him off gently. Relax, she said. You've been doing it alone long enough. His throat caught, He didn't even know she knew. After 2 hours of laughter and dancing to a children's playlist on YouTube, Pearl eventually crashed in Mackenzie's arms. Daisy, too, curled beside her on the couch, both girls breathing slowly, peacefully asleep. Davis stood there watching them, Mackenzie cradling both girls like she'd birthed them herself. A soft smile touched her lips. Her head leaned slightly against the backrest, her hands stroking Pearl's hair unconsciously. She didn't even know how breathtaking she looked. Not just beautiful, divine. He moved into the kitchen, needing space to breathe, to regroup, to think. She followed a few minutes later, barefoot now, whisper quiet. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean to take over your morning." "You didn't," he said quickly, resting his hands on the countertop. "They haven't laughed like that in a long time." She glanced away, brushing a curl behind her ear. "They're really good girls. So sweet, so kind. You've done an amazing job, Davis." "I don't feel like I have," he admitted, voice low. "Most days I'm just trying to make sure they eat and don't cry." "But look at them," she said. "They trust you. They're attached to you. That means you're doing something right." He looked at her, suddenly overwhelmed by how much he wanted to kiss her. Not just out of desire, but out of reverence, out of awe. "I don't know what this is," he whispered. "You and me. But this, today, meant more than I can explain." Mackenzie didn't flinch. "You don't have to explain it. I'm not asking you for anything, Davis. I just want to be here. For them. For you. Whatever this is, we can take our time." He exhaled slowly. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. She nodded. "When we were kids, I noticed you. I always did. But I thought, no way a girl like that would ever look at someone like me." Mackenzie blinked, startled. "Davis, I looked at you every day for 6 years," she said, laughing softly. "You just never looked back." He reached for her hand then, slowly, gently. She didn't pull away. "Maybe now I finally can." "Oh." They stood in that kitchen, two people broken in their own ways, joined by the love of two children and the tenderness that had taken root between them. It wasn't romance yet, but it was the beginning of something sacred. And Davis knew, in the quietest part of his heart, that he had found something he didn't even know he was missing: a home that smiled like Mackenzie Leonard. It began with small things: late-night texts, unplanned visits, her dropping off banana bread after work, him showing up with suya wrapped in old newspapers because he passed the stand and remembered she liked it spicy. No labels, no declarations. Just two people orbiting closer, pulled by a gravity neither of them had the words for. Davis found himself looking forward to her voice. Not just what she said, but how she said it. Soft, firm, thoughtful. Mackenzie didn't talk to him like he was broken. She didn't flinch at his silence or try to fix him. She sat in the quiet with him and made it feel like peace instead of punishment. One night after he put the girls to bed, he stepped out into the compound, unable to sleep. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of hibiscus and diesel. He didn't expect to see her outside too, barefoot on her small balcony in a silk robe, sipping tea and staring at the moon like it had personally disappointed her. Their eyes met. A familiar hush settled between them. She didn't say a word, just turned and walked back inside. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed. "Kenzie, you up?" He smiled at the screen like a schoolboy. "Davis. Couldn't sleep. You?" "Kenzie." "Same." A pause. Then, "Kenzie. Want to come over?" He didn't hesitate. He didn't knock either. She left the door slightly open, just enough for him to slip in. The lights were dim. Soft music played low from her Bluetooth speaker. Erykah Badu or Asa, something rich and slow. She wore an oversized tee again, legs bare, curls out and wild, like they only were when she was completely herself. "Tea?" she asked, like this was the most natural thing in the world. He nodded, still watching her. "Yeah, please." They sat on the couch, legs tucked beneath them, two mugs steaming on the table. the silence between them thick with questions neither had the courage to ask yet. It was magic, Davis thought. The ease, the closeness, the comfort. How had he missed her all his life? How had he looked at Mackenzie Leonard? Brilliant, beautiful, nurturing Mackenzie, and only seen the girl next door. Everyone had known. He remembered now. Neighborhood jokes, side comments. Even Amara once teasing him. That girl has a full-blown crush on you, bro, and you're just out here flexing your abs. He had laughed it off, thought nothing of it. He was focused on football, on escaping. He never looked at Mackenzie. But now he couldn't look away. She turned toward him, her face half lit by the yellow lamp near the couch. Davis, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever feel like life robbed you of something? Like you lived a whole other life before realizing what you actually needed? He swallowed. Every day. She nodded like she understood. I used to think love was about getting someone to see you, but now I think it's about being seen without having to scream. That hit him in the chest. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I never saw you before, Kenzie. Not really, and I hate that. She smiled gently. You were young. So was I. No, he said. I was blind. He turned to her, his voice lower now. You make things quiet inside me. Not dead quiet, just still, like I can breathe here. Her eyes softened. You are breathing. A beat passed, then another. He reached for her hand. She let him. She didn't pull away when he leaned in slightly, but he didn't kiss her. Not yet. They stayed like that, foreheads nearly touching, the space between them humming. I don't know what to call this, he whispered. We don't have to call it anything, she replied. Let's just be here. They sat like that until nearly 1 a.m. talking, laughing, saying everything and saying nothing. And when he finally stood to leave, brushing her knuckles with his thumb, Davis felt something sacred settle in his chest. He wasn't falling in love. He was in love. And it had taken him half his life to see the one person who had always loved him exactly as he was. Mackenzie had always known there were layers to Davis's story. You didn't return from a marriage like that, rushed, loud, public, and just slip back into normal life. She had seen the sadness in his eyes, the ghosts that clung to his silences. But she'd never pressed him. She knew better than to ask a wounded man to unwrap his scars before he was ready. But one night he offered them to her anyway. They were sitting on her balcony again. It had become a quiet ritual between them. These stolen hours after the girls had gone to bed, the world had fallen asleep, and only the two of them remained awake enough to tell the truth. The night was warm, the sky a tapestry of fading stars. Davis held a glass of wine loosely in one hand. Mackenzie nursed a cup of warm milk. She always had warm milk. It made him smile. He hadn't said much that evening, just held her hand now and then, like her touch kept the dark from seeping in. But when she leaned her head against his shoulder and whispered, "You can talk to me," something shifted in him. So he did. She cheated on me the first year into our marriage, he said flatly. Mackenzie froze, then sat up slowly. Bella? He nodded, eyes fixed on the distance. It wasn't even with someone I didn't know. It was with one of my teammates, someone I brought into the circle. A rookie. Oh God, Davis. It started when I was out with a back injury. I was depressed, angry, not the man she married. She started staying out late, making excuses. I didn't want to believe it at first. Then I found messages. He took a deep breath, his jaw tightening. It wasn't just sex. She loved him, or thought she did. When I confronted her, she said I had become boring, that I wasn't enough anymore. Mackenzie's heart broke at the calm in his voice, the stillness that only comes from pain that's lived inside you too long. Why didn't you leave then? She asked gently. I stayed for Daisy. She was just 2. I couldn't imagine not being in her life every day. And then Pearl came. Things got worse. We slept in separate rooms, lived like roommates. And I let it go on because I didn't want to be the failure, the man who lost everything. She reached over and took his hand, her thumb stroking the scar near his wrist. She made me feel like I was lucky she stayed, he said, even when I was giving her everything. That's not love, Davis. That's manipulation. He looked at her then, really looked. Do you know what it feels like to give someone the best of you and have them treat it like leftovers? Mackenzie nodded, tears stinging the backs of her eyes. Yes, I do. They sat in silence, breathing together, hearts slowly sinking in the stillness. She told me once, Davis continued, that I didn't have depth, that all I knew how to do was chase a ball. She said I'd never understand what real intimacy meant. Mackenzie turned to face him fully now. She was wrong. She said I'd never be enough for a real woman. She was very wrong. He exhaled, shakily, finally letting the truth settle between them like dust in a quiet room. I don't know why I'm telling you all this, he murmured. Because you trust me, she replied. I do, he said softly. I trust you more than anyone. Her heart ached, not just for what he'd been through, but for the boy she remembered. The young man who had gone off to chase his dreams and come back with bruises no one could see. All this time she'd believed he was untouchable, that she could never measure up. But now she saw him clearly. Vulnerable, beautiful, whole, even in the breaking. She leaned in, brushing a soft kiss against his cheek. You don't have to prove anything to me, Davis. I see you. I always have. He didn't say anything for a long time, just held her hand tighter and pulled her against the chest. In that moment, it wasn't about romance or desire. It was about truth, about the raw, aching honesty that comes when two people stop pretending they're okay. Later, as she walked him to the gate, he paused under the moonlight and looked back at her. I wish I'd seen you sooner, Kenzie. She smiled, bittersweet. You're here now. And somehow, that was enough. The night it happened, it didn't start with fireworks or declarations. It started with silence, the kind that curled around two people who already understood each other without words. Davis had walked Mackenzie home after another late evening under the stars, their hands brushing, then locking, like magnets finally given permission to connect. Her laughter lingered in his ears, the sound of it grounding him, healing him. When they reached her door, neither of them wanted to let go. Come in, she said, voice low, steady. He followed, heartbeat loud in his chest. Inside, the world dimmed to just the two of them. The lamp cast a golden glow on her brown skin, highlighting the curve of her neck, the softness of her eyes. She moved slowly, deliberately, like she knew what this moment meant, like she had waited for it as long as he had. She had. He stood still as she approached him, her fingers reaching up to touch his face. You've changed, she whispered. So have you. I never stopped seeing you, she said, and I never really started, until now. The kiss came like breath, natural, inevitable. His lips found hers, slow at first, reverent, like prayer. Her hands cupped his jaw, pulling him closer. His arms wrapped around her waist, drawing her against him until there was no space left between them. The years melted. The silence broke. And in that kiss they told each other everything. Every missed chance, every sleepless night, every aching day they had spent pretending they didn't feel what they felt. He kissed her like a man who had dreamed of this every night, but never believed he'd earn it. She kissed him like a woman who had waited a lifetime for the one person who had always belonged to her, even when he didn't know it. When he lifted her into his arms and she wrapped herself around him, it wasn't desperation. It was something purer. It was recognition. He carried her to the bedroom, their mouths never breaking contact. She laughed softly against his lips, the sound muffled, intimate. He paused, forehead resting against hers. Are you sure? He asked. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He undressed her, slowly, like unwrapping a memory. She helped him out of his shirt, her fingers brushing his scars. The physical ones, the invisible ones too. When their skin finally met, it wasn't just bodies. It was healing. It was history. They made love like two people finally arriving home after a storm. It wasn't rushed. It was tender and raw, filled with soft moans, whispered names, and moments where they simply stared at each other, overwhelmed by the beauty of it all. He traced her jaw with his lips. She ran her hands down his spine, memorizing every inch. When he entered her, it was a merging of more than just flesh. It was spirit. It was the sealing of a story that had begun when she was 12, when he was 18, when the world was different and the timing wrong. Now the timing was perfect. They moved in rhythm, each gasp and sigh sinking like music only they could hear. And when they came undone, together, it wasn't just release. It was surrender. Afterwards, she lay curled against his chest, the sheets tangled around them, his heartbeat loud and steady beneath her ear. He kissed her forehead, her shoulder, the inside of her wrist. Neither of them spoke for a while. Words would have been too small. But then in the quiet, she whispered, "This feels like everything I've ever prayed for." He held her tighter. "You're everything I didn't know I needed." Outside, Lagos slept. Inside, two hearts finally rested. It wasn't just a kiss. It wasn't just sex. It was a vow, a beginning, a love, quiet, deep, and unshakable, that had waited patiently in the shadows for years. And now, it was finally home. Mackenzie woke up to sunlight creeping through the curtains, the scent of vanilla lingering in the air, and Davis's arm draped over her waist. His breathing was slow even. Peaceful. She turned slightly to look at him, his lashes resting against his cheeks, his mouth slightly parted, that faint furrow still between his brows, even in sleep. For a moment, she allowed herself the fantasy. This was her man, her family, her morning. But Lagos never let fantasies last long. By midday, the illusion cracked. It started with a text from Moyo, then a call from her boss, then her cousin, then her hairstylist, all asking the same thing. Is it true? The photos had hit social media. One of their neighbors, a girl who'd always smiled a little too hard at Davis, had captured them. Davis and Mackenzie at her balcony 2 nights ago, his arm wrapped around her waist, her head resting on his shoulder. It had looked romantic, private, intimate, and the gossip blogs had pounced. NFL star Davis Adams moves on with Lagos accountant. Meet the woman who's replaced Bella. Is she stepmom material? From the streets of Surulere to the bed of a footballer, inside the rise of Mackenzie Leonard. That headline broke something inside her. Davis saw the look on her face as she stood frozen with her phone in her hand. What is it? He asked gently. She turned the screen to him. He read it once, twice, then cursed under his breath. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault, she said softly. But the words caught in her throat, because in a way, it was. It wasn't his intention, but it was his name that had brought the vultures. She'd worked so hard to build a clean, professional life, years of staying out of gossip, out of drama, and in one weekend, her name was now trending for all the wrong reasons. And what hurt more than anything was how true the last part of that headline felt. The implication that she had waited around all these years for her chance to be chosen. As if her love had been a transaction. As if she was just a consolation prize. She sat down, her head in her hands. Davis crouched in front of her. Kenzie, talk to me. I knew this would happen, she said finally, voice shaking. The moment I let myself feel it, I knew. You didn't do anything wrong. I know, but I've worked too hard to be seen as his girl. I'm not just someone's happy ending. I'm someone. He closed his eyes, his jaw tightening. I'll call a few people. Get the post taken down. She shook her head. It's already out. The internet doesn't forget. Silence, then softly. Do you regret it? Last night? Her eyes filled with tears. Never. But then she stood. I just need time, Davis. Not from you, but from all of this. From the noise. From being seen only when it's scandal. I'll fix it, he said, his voice a low promise. No, she whispered. You don't have to. This isn't a mistake to clean up. It's just a lot. And with that, she walked him to the door, kissed his cheek, and closed it gently behind him. That night, Davis sat alone with his daughters. Pearl played with her dolls. Daisy colored quietly. But his mind was somewhere else, on Mackenzie's balcony, on the way her body fit against his, on the way her voice cracked when she asked for space. He hated the world for doing this. He hated himself for not protecting her. But most of all, he hated how powerless he felt. The love was real, but now it had to prove itself, under pressure, under scrutiny, under fire. And Davis Adams was ready to fight. He just hoped Mackenzie Leonard would still be there when the smoke cleared. The days that followed felt like quiet heartbreak. Not the kind that raged and screamed, but the kind that sat in your chest like a weight, stealing joy in small, quiet ways. Mackenzie returned to her routine, dressing up in crisp suits, attending boardroom meetings, and answering emails like her name wasn't being dragged across gossip blogs. She smiled, she nodded, she performed. But every night she returned home to silence. And no Davis at her door, no warm laughter, no girls dancing through her hallway. She had told him she needed time, and he had respected that, completely. Too completely. She hadn't expected him to disappear entirely. But maybe that was fair. Maybe he was protecting her in the only way he knew how. And still, she missed them. All three of them. Meanwhile, just next door, Davis sat in the living room with Pearl asleep on his chest and Daisy curled under a blanket watching cartoons. His phone buzzed constantly, calls from his agent, former teammates, journalists sniffing around for a quote on the mystery woman. He ignored them all. The only text he wanted never came. Not from Mackenzie. He had told himself he wouldn't push. That real love waited. That if she needed space, he'd give her the whole sky. But one night, as he tucked the girls into bed and returned to the quiet, he couldn't take it anymore. He stepped out, stood under the moonlight between their two houses and looked up at her balcony. It was dark. Still, he waited. And just as he was about to turn away, her light flicked on. She stepped outside in an oversized tee and slippers, teacup in hand. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. Until Mackenzie whispered, "I thought you were done waiting." He took a shaky breath. "I never stopped waiting. I just didn't want to make things worse." She came down slowly, quietly. When she reached him, the distance between them was small, but the air was heavy. "I missed you," she said first. His heart clenched. "I missed you every second. I wasn't pushing you away because I regretted what we shared. I was just protecting myself, my name, my peace, all the things I built before you came back." "I know," he said, "and I should have protected you better. You're not responsible for the world's cruelty." "I'm not," he agreed, "but I want to be the one who makes it softer for you." Her breath caught, and then he stepped closer. "Kenzie, I never saw you before. But now that I do, I can't unsee you. I don't want to. You're the only thing that feels true. I love you." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "Say it again." "I love you." The words felt like home. She stepped into his arms without hesitation, burying her face in his chest. He held her like she was everything, and to him, she was. Later that weekend, he took her and the girls to a quiet beach just outside of Lecce. No social media, no paparazzi, just them, the waves, and laughter. Daisy collected seashells with Mackenzie like they were mother and daughter already. Pearl threw sand into the air, giggling uncontrollably. Davis stood back and watched, overwhelmed. This wasn't scandal. This was family. When Mackenzie looked over and caught him staring, he didn't look away. He walked to her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and whispered, "Thank you for coming back." I never left, she replied. I was just waiting for you to see me. And now he did. Fully, completely, and forever. The sun was soft that morning. The kind of soft that felt like a blessing. The kind that wrapped around your skin like a mother's hand, gentle and reassuring. Davis stood at the small grave site tucked behind his family's home in Surulere. The headstone was clean, newly polished. Martha Adams, his mother, the woman who taught him how to pray, how to be kind, how to hold a crying child, how to love, even though he didn't realize it until she was gone. He hadn't been there when she passed. He was in Miami, chasing a dream, and a woman who never really saw him. When the call came that she was gone, he was in a locker room, his phone silenced beneath a pile of jerseys. By the time he returned the call, the funeral was over. He hadn't said goodbye. Not properly. But today, he would. And he wouldn't be alone. Mackenzie arrived just after noon, dressed in a simple cream dress and soft flats. Her curls were pulled back, her makeup minimal. In her arms was a bouquet of white lilies, his mother's favorite. In her presence, Davis felt calmer, braver, whole. He took the flowers from her, gently laid them at the foot of the grave, and stood beside her in silence. Then he knelt, not at the grave, but before her. Mackenzie froze, her heart skipping a beat. Davis? He pulled out a small velvet box from his jacket pocket, hands trembling. I know this isn't a restaurant, he said quietly. I know there are no fairy lights or photographers. But I wanted her to be here. The first woman who ever loved me. I wanted her to witness me asking the last woman I'll ever love to be mine. Tears spilled down Mackenzie's cheeks. You've seen every side of me, he continued. The athlete, the failure, the father, the man. You held space for my pain, for my healing, for my girls. You didn't try to fix me. You just stood beside me. And I've never felt more like myself than I do when I'm with you. He opened the box, a simple, elegant gold band with a small diamond. Nothing flashy, nothing loud, just real. Mackenzie Leonard, he whispered, voice thick. Will you marry me? She dropped to her knees in front of him, cupped his face with both hands, and whispered back, yes, 1,000 times, yes. They kissed, their foreheads pressed together as the wind picked up around them, rustling the trees, the flowers, the soul of the woman who raised Davis to be the man he had now become. Later they sat under the mango tree beside the grave, his arms wrapped around her, their fingers intertwined. The girls played nearby, their laughter floating like music on the wind. This is home, Mackenzie whispered. He nodded. You're my home. And beneath the soft gaze of his mother's spirit, a promise was made, one not of perfection, but of patience, not of fairy tales, but of truth, a love that waited, a love that healed, a love that would last. The wedding wasn't grand. It wasn't held at a 5-star hotel or streamed for fans or dressed in designer gowns. It was quiet, private, sacred. It was held in the same backyard where Mackenzie had once watched Davis kick footballs with bare feet, where she used to press her face to the window as a little girl, daydreaming about a future that had seemed too far to reach. But now it was here, and it was hers. White chairs lined the grass beneath wide canopy tents. Bougainvillea blossoms framed the altar, and in the front row sat the people who mattered most. Davis's father, Amara, a few close friends, and most importantly, 2 little flower girls with matching cream dresses and puffy curls, bouncing with each step. Daisy and Pearl walked down the aisle first, tossing petals and beaming. The guests laughed as Pearl stopped halfway to pick up a petal she liked and show it to her grandpa. Daisy gently tugged her along, and Mackenzie felt her heart ache in the best way. Then came the music. Soft, soulful, the instrumental version of Asa's Stay Tonight. Mackenzie stepped out. Her dress was simple, hugging her curves in all the right places, the off-shoulder neckline framed with delicate embroidery. Her skin glowed in the afternoon sun. Her hair was swept up into an elegant bun, her eyes bright with tears she didn't try to hold back. There was no veil, no grand entrance. Just her. And when Davis saw her standing there in the light with her whole heart on display, he lost every word he had ever known. She walked down the aisle slowly, her eyes locked on his. And when she reached him, he whispered, "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "You're the only one I ever wanted to be seen by," she replied. The vows were handwritten. Mackenzie's voice trembled when she said, "I loved you when I was 12, and I didn't know what love meant. I love you now with everything I've become, and I promise to love every version of you that still needs healing." Davis's hands shook as he slid the ring onto her finger. "I was a man who thought he had everything when I was farthest from myself. But with you, I've found home, peace, and purpose. I promise to protect your heart with my life." When they kissed, the crowd erupted in cheers. Daisy clapped wildly. Pearl shouted, "Mommy Kenzie!" and raced to their feet. Mackenzie scooped her up in one arm, Davis in the other, and they laughed into a moment none of them would ever forget. That evening, the reception took place under fairy lights in the same backyard. There were no formal speeches, just dancing, food, music, and love. Davis held Mackenzie close as they danced beneath the stars. "She called you Mummy," he whispered. "I've been waiting to be theirs for years," Mackenzie said, eyes wet again. "And now I'm yours. All of me." They kissed, slow and deep. Later that night, in the quiet of their bedroom, Mackenzie lay in his arms, listening to the rain tap against the windows. "I still can't believe it," she said. "What?" "That this happened. That after everything, we got here." He smiled into her hair. "We always would have." She looked up at him. "Even if things had gone differently?" He shook his head. "I don't believe in accidents anymore. I believe in timing, in grace, in love that waits." She kissed him then, soft and certain. Because in the end, it wasn't a fantasy. It wasn't a childhood crush. It wasn't even just a second chance. It was love. The kind that comes quietly, fights gently, and stays when everything else has fallen away. And finally, it was theirs. Forever. Finally. Dear viewers, what lesson did you take away from this dramatic tale? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.